The lesson topic for this video is graphing radical functions using HK. Now, for starters, I want you to know that if you have not yet watched the previous video for this chapter, chapter 14, graphing radicals using a table, you're going to want to do that first because I am starting off with information we learned from the previous lesson. So in the previous lesson, you guys, we had y equals the square root of x as our parent function. We plugged in a 0 for x and found the corresponding y value. We plugged in a 1, the square root of 1 was 1, plugged in 4, square root of 4 is 2, and plugged in 9, the square root of 9 was 3. And we plotted those points and we graphed the curve. And we talked about how this is the parent function for a square root function. Then we had another one that we tried, and we talked about how if we put a 0 in here, 0 minus 1 is negative 1, and we can't take the square root of a negative value. So then we started with 1, we put in some different x values, and we found the corresponding y values, and again, we plotted the points and graphed the curve. What I want you to notice right now is the similarities and the differences between this red and blue curve. Think about this for a second. I have this drawn down here. It's kind of wiggly, but this is why it's here. It's kind of messy, but I try to trace over that red line right there, and I want to show you that there that red line is. And if I take that red line and I move it up to the blue line, I want you to notice that what? It's exactly the same curve. You see that? It's exactly the same curve as the red line. That is a similarity between these two curves for sure. What is a difference? Well, the difference is where it's located in the coordinate plane. This red curve starts at 0, 0. Where does the blue curve start? It starts at 1, 3. Where have we seen the point 1, 3? Well, we saw that right here. All right, 1, 3 in our table. Where else do you see 1, 3? Well, we kind of see it here, 1, 3. Now, this is a negative 1, and we're going to talk about that. But here's the deal. HK, and we're going to look at this on the next screen, HK is going to be what we call the starting point for our curve for our square root function. So the starting point of this is 0, 0. The starting point of this is 1, 3. And it does come from this, even though that says negative, and we'll talk about that on the next page. Okay, so there's a lot of equations here, but I'm going to walk through a bunch of information here. So first of all, this we talked about in the previous lesson is the standard form for a square root function. Y equals a times the square root of x minus h plus k. And again, that plus k is outside the root. This is the equation we had on the previous screen. Y equals the square root of x minus 1 plus 3. Notice this equation is in this form. The only thing that we're missing, or what it seems like we're missing, is a number out in front here for a. So I want to point out that, again, just like with the variable x, if there is no number in front of a root, the number is 1. So now if we compare our standard form with this equation now, so I'm just going to kind of cross this one out here. Okay, it's the same equation, same exact equation. I just wrote that 1 right in there. So if we compare these two equations, we see our y equals a is 1, right? So let's go ahead and write that in here. For this equation, a equals 1. And then we have our square root of x minus h. Here we have our square root of x minus 1. So if the x is an x and the minus is the minus, that means h is 1. So I'm going to write that next. H equals 1. And then we have plus k, and k is 3. Now, when I, on the previous screen, said that our starting point for this equation right here was 1, 3, that's because we get those values from h and k, and h is 1 and k is 3. So our starting point will always be hk, which in this case is 1, 3. So before we look at how that works with a graph, what I'd like us to do is go off to this side over here and write down our h and k values for each of these equations because something a little bit tricky happens in some cases. So let's take a look at these. Okay, so first I put this equation up here at the top. So this is our standard equation here. And notice for every one of these, we're going to start off with just our a value being 1 for all of these. We're really just wanting to focus on h and k, hk. So let's look at our first, again, we're trying to find hk. Well, for the first one, our h is here, x minus h, so x minus 4 means h is 4, and plus k is plus 7, so k is 7. So our hk, our starting point for this equation is 4, 7. How about the next one? Hopefully you said 8, 6. Again, our h is right here, it's 8, and our k is 6. How about the next one? So this time, we still have in the root, we still have x minus a number. So x minus a number, that number is h, so 2. But this time, out here is minus 9. Minus 9 means that our k value is negative 9, because if it's supposed to be plus k, and now it's minus 9, that's another way of saying plus a negative 9, right? Plus a negative 9. So that's negative 9. So what's the next one? Again, we have a 7 here, and then we have a negative 1. So 7, negative 1. And now something different happens on the next two. Okay, so now inside the root is x plus 5. What's in the root is supposed to be x minus a number. It's x plus a number. So again, what we have to think about is that x plus 5 is another way of saying x minus negative 5. X minus negative 5, which means negative 5 is our h value. And then we have plus 3 out here. And plus 3, when it says plus k, well, that means the k value is 3. Okay, so let's do this last one, and then we'll kind of sum that all up. When we have a plus 4 right here, and the original standard form has minus h, we know that this is going to be minus 4 or negative 4. And if we're supposed to have plus k on the outside of the root and it's a minus 2, then we have negative 2. So what you're seeing here is a pattern, right? Whatever is under our square root with x, so x minus 4, if it's x minus a number, that number goes in here exactly as it looks. So minus 8 means 8 goes here. Minus 2 means 2 goes here. Minus 7 means 7 goes here. But if it's plus 5, we need to put in a negative 5. If it's plus 4, we need to put in a negative 4. And then the number on the outside of the root, plus 7, it should be plus a number. So positive 7 means 7. Positive 6 means 6. If it's a negative 9, you put negative 9. Negative 1 means negative 1. Positive 3 means 3. And negative 2 means negative 2 goes there. So let's try one more of these before we start graphing. Okay, so if we have y equals the square root of x plus 11 minus 5, what is our starting point? What is hk? Well, I hope you wrote that it's negative 11, negative 5. Again, it's supposed to be x minus a number here, so then that has to go in as a negative 11, so that minus a minus makes it a plus here. And then the negative 5 outside is supposed to be plus k, so if it's minus 5, then k is negative 5. Okay, so we are going to graph a couple of square root functions again, like we did a couple lessons ago, but now we are going to use some of our new information about our starting point. Because if you remember, there are certain values here that will make the square root have a negative under the root, and we don't want a negative under the root. We want it to be positives only so that we can graph it, because you can't graph when there's a negative value under there. So what we're going to do is we're going to find the starting point. That's our first point we're going to put here is our starting point. Well, again, if it's x minus h in the root, then x minus 8 means that 8 is our x value of our starting point. And then the k is out here, and that is 6. So there's our starting point for this curve. So if I go to 8, 6, there it is right here. That is the starting point of this curve. Now, we don't know if this is going to curve up and to the right like all the other examples we've kind of seen so far. It could curve down. It could curve up and left. It could curve up and down. Or I'm sorry, left and down. So we don't know which way it curves yet. Maybe it still curves the same way as we've been practicing. Let's find out. Let's put in a 9, the number just to the right of that starting point. Let's put in a 9. So if I put a 9 in for x right here, I'm going to get y equals the square root of 9 minus 8 plus 6. Well, we know 9 minus 8 is 1, so it's the square root of 1 plus 6. And we know the square root of 1 is 1 plus 6 is 7. So our second point is 9, 7. So 9, 7 is right here, and this does in fact curve the same way as the first several that we have graphed. So it's going to curve like that. Okay, let's try the second one here. Again, let's find our starting point, HK, to get started on this, and let's put that in as our first point in our table. All right, so be careful here, right? It says x plus 5, and our h value usually comes after a minus sign, right? X minus h. So then we know that is going to be negative 5 for x, and then our k value comes right here, plus 3, so it is 3. So we have the point negative 5, 3, which is right here. Now, if you're thinking, I didn't think x could be negative, x can be negative. It's just that what we have under the root can't be. Now, if I put negative 5 in here, negative 5 plus 5 is 0. The square root of 0 is 0, and then 0 plus 3, is 3, and that would be our y value. So negative 5, 3 works for this function. Now let's put in another x value. Let's think about this. What if I said 0? Because 0 is such a nice, easy number to use. But if I do 0 plus 5 is 5, and then I have to take the square root of 5, I need to go grab a calculator because I don't know what the square root of 5 is off the top of my head. But I do know if I had 4 instead of 5, I could do the square root of 4. So that means if I had one number lower than 0, I could make it a little easier on myself. So I'm going to put in a negative 1. Negative 1 plus 5 is 4. The square root of 4 is 2. 2 plus 3 is 5. So my y value is 5. So negative 1, 5 is also on my curve, which is right here. So again, I know that it's going up, it's curving up and to the right, like so. And there is my curve for my square root function for the second example. Okay, just summing things up one more time because I want to make sure this is really clear. When we look at our parent function, or not our parent function, our standard form for radical functions, square root functions, here we are, and here is an example of a square root function. We know a is 3. We'll talk more about that in the next lesson about what that does for us. But we now know what h and k do for us. They help us find the starting point of the curve. So write down, what is our starting point here? What is hk for this function? We have x, we have minus, we have h is 8, and we have plus k, and in this case it's minus 4, so we know it's negative 4. Let me know if you have questions.